Chapter 3. Welcome to Heorot. They'd been waiting for over an hour outside the great mead hall of Heorot. This gave the king plenty of time to arrive and assemble his court, and it gave the Geatish warriors plenty of time to admire the front of the hall. It was by far the largest building any of them had ever seen. It was built of dark cedar, all bound together with cast-iron bands, decorated with gold filigree, and had a low, broad, peaked roof. Its roof could only be called low in light of how enormous the rest of the structure was. The roof was gold, though whether it was of gold paint, gold leaf, or plates of actual gold was impossible to tell without climbing up. On the front of the structure loomed two enormous wooden shapes like horns reaching at angles skyward. Apart from the front and back entrances, Heorot was bordered on all sides by cedar trees. The heavy oaken doors, bound in frames and cross-girdings of cast iron with gold decorations, hung on heavy iron pins that fitted into heavy iron rings. They were securely locked from the inside. Two Danes in full war gear stood as door wardens, spears in their right hands and swords on their belts. They did that thing guards do, where they never look away from you, but never look at you directly either. A bird called to its mate in the trees for a time, getting no answer. Eventually, the Geats heard the thudding and clanking of the mechanism being unfastened from inside, and the heavy doors swung open. A tall, slender thane with a ginger mustache stood there. He was named Wulfgar, and he had a brief word with them. "Okay, now where do you come from again, with all of these gleaming battle shields, your finely crafted mail shirts, your helmets, bright banner, and these proud lances?" he started out. "I have never seen anything like this." The towering leader of the visiting warriors replied, "We are close friends and faithful servants of Hygelac, king of the Geats, and would like to speak to King Hrothgar of the Danes about his difficulty. My name is Beowulf, sister son of Hygelac." Wulfgar said, "I will go and have a word, and see what our generous and gracious lord has to say about this." And he turned behind him, and called out more loudly, "My liege, some Geatmen have sailed here over the sea, led by one they call Beowulf. They wish to have a word about our situation. Perhaps it would be a good idea to speak with them?" The Geats could hear then the voice of one old, but filled with energy, saying, "I remember this man, when he was just a tiny lad. His father, long since passed on, was named Ecgtheow. Lost both of his parents, Beowulf did, the way I heard it. They say he has the hand strength of 30 men. Maybe he is the answer to our difficulty. Tell him and his men to come in, and that they are most welcome." Wulfgar told Beowulf and his Geatish warriors, "These loyal thanes will keep your battle gear safe out here until you're done conferring." The two guards gestured to the well-worn weapons racks that stood to either side of the doors. Clearly, the Geats were to store their weapons outside while talking with King Hrothgar in the hall itself. One did not enter the presence of the king armed for battle. Their helmets and coats of mail they could wear inside. If any of them had been using a walking stick or staff to lean on, perhaps this might have been allowed, but not blades. So there was a great deal of unbuckling of belts and the clunking of iron-tipped lances being tossed into a pile. Their shields they placed in a long row, leaning against the wall as well. A shield has often proved injurious when one is punched smartly in the mouth with the edge, or simply backhanded with one. Once they were disarmed, Wulfgar waved them in, and they all trooped into the relative dimness of the great wooden hall, pausing for a moment to take in the wide expanse above them. The entire place was full of long, low tables of dark, sturdy oak. They bore the marks of not only years of spilled drinks, but on a few toward the back could be seen deep gouges and more ominous-looking, darkly spattered stains. Hrothgar was seated on a raised platform to the left and halfway to the rear of the hall. He was white-bearded and elderly, but it was clear he had been a tall, strong man in his youth. With him sat his queen Wealhtheow, auburn-haired, lovely, and very young compared to Hrothgar, but clearly the mother of a couple of teenage children who sat nearby. A retinue of various thanes and earls sat below, waiting. Still wearing his mail shirt and iron helmet, Beowulf strode over to stand below the king's platform, his men following a couple of steps behind him, still gazing around them at the hall. Beowulf's warm, growly voice rang out, "Hail, Hrothgar! I am the sister son of Hygelac and his faithful servant. I've done a number of amazing things since I was a boy, and look to do more and greater things still. I heard of your difficulty here in Denmark from seafarers passing through my own land, who told me of the magnificence of this mighty hall, standing empty and forlorn each evening when men ought to be in here drinking and telling tall tales. My own men urged me to come try my hand at setting things aright here. They knew of my enormous strength, and have seen me covered in gore, defeating enemy warriors 5 at a time without help, and crawling out of the waves, having slain many underwater creatures. I hope, gracious Hrothgar, that you will permit me to help you in your difficulty, and that I have not traveled here in vain. I have heard only a bit about your difficulty and who or what is causing it. Perhaps you would tell me more about the situation." Chapter 4. Grendel. As you know very well, my sister's son, the difficulty the Danes were having was with a violent, dark creature of the shadows and watery fens named Grendel. They say that when he heard the Danes loudly singing and drinking and telling tales of their recent victories in battle, that this uproar filled his heart to overflowing with hatred and black spite. Now, some in telling the tale say that Grendel was a giant, and it is clear that he was very large. Others say he was some kind of troll or aquatic pond demon. Still others say he was a kind of ghoul or ghast, but one that was at least partly made of meat like you and I. Some paint him as a misunderstood, sorrowful, neglected exile, resorting in his sorrows and lack of human companionship to home invasion and cannibalism, for he was a cannibal. The creature Grendel was not the usual kind of spirit or ghost that we are familiar with, as he could bleed and needed to eat. But he was not quite like you or I, being larger than the largest skilding you have ever seen and impervious to wounding with weapons. He was not merely a cannibal, as he did not simply sneak unsuspecting shepherdesses and goat herds conveniently far from help, but came by night and burst straight into Heorot, a place filled with a collection of the most dangerous drunken speardanes in all of Denmark. Any creature in search of a simple meal would never choose Heorot as its larder, yet Grendel did, bursting in the night, mortally wounding mighty warriors without so much as a dagger or hammer, abducting them and fleeing back to his watery lair, leaping and laughing, part of the corpse in a leathern sack to eat later, and some of the body and blood in his belly already. And we know he was not only a water creature, as he moved easily and quickly over distance upon land. We know the creator of all things would not allow Grendel to touch the king himself, and so the creature tormented Hrothgar by brutalizing his bravest warriors. We know he was not lonely and looking for womanly companionship, as he showed no interest at all in stuffing any of the lovely damsels of Heorot into the leathern hunting bag he bore at his waist to stuff half-eaten warriors into. All we know for certain is that he hated mirth and merriment, that he ate people, that he enjoyed it immensely, and that he lived with his mother. After all was discussed, Beowulf and his men were given seats in the hall and refreshments, and the Skald of Heorot played his lute wonderfully well, and in a powerful voice sang an instructive religious song. The song reminded them all of how the Almighty Maker had first imagined and then brought into being the land where they lived, bordered on all sides with wild ocean and battered by beautiful and powerful winds that combed away the morning ocean fog from the majestic trees. About how he made man and woman and told them to in turn make more people, which they did in the most delightful of ways, resulting in a pair of brothers named Cain and Abel. The song related how, like many brothers, the two did not get along, and so Cain had invented murder. In sweet and pleasing stanzas, the song related how, having barely dropped the rock that dripped with the blood of his brother, whose corpse was residing in a shallow grave, Cain tried to hide from the all-knowing one what he had done. The song concluded by explaining that Cain, for his sins, was sent into exile and wandered the earth fathering giants, demons, trolls, and sea monsters who shared their progenitors' malice and thirst for violence and murder, bloodletting, and brother-slaying. Beowulf and his men applauded loudly when the song ended, and Hrothgar explained, "And so Grendel, this monstrous child of murderous Cain, hates our freedom. and so this evildoer makes Heorot far too dangerous a place to stay after dark. For 12 years, whenever we have tried to celebrate anything here, we have soon entertained that grim visitor in the night, and some of our best warriors have been bagged and carried off half-eaten. Hrothgar gestured disgustedly at the tables toward the rear of Heorot, which bore a dark stain. The flagstones there, though clearly scrubbed thoroughly, also bore similar stains. Beowulf stood up to lay out his plan. I have heard, during my professional assessment of the matter, that this creature uses no weapons, so I propose to meet him without weapons of my own. Not a spear, not a shield, not a dagger, axe, or sword of any kind, not even armor. I intend to wrestle him. At this, Beowulf threw his iron helmet on the table with a loud clunk and pulled his mail shirt over his head, tossing it beside the helmet. Standing there in only his homespun under-armor padded shirt that kept the rings of his mail from digging into his flesh when stopping blades, he threw out his arms to ask for Hrothgar's approval. If I win, I will have solved your difficulty, and if I lose, you will have but to send my things back over the sea to my uncle. If I am defeated, there won't be anything left of me to bury once Grendel has had his supper here in the hall. Hrothgar thought for a moment, and then spoke quietly. I remember your father Ecgtheow. He got heavily involved in a very bloody feud with the Wolfings and ended up killing Hithelaf. He wasn't quite able to make things right over there, so he had to flee to our lands here, right when I was taking the throne. I sent some Weirgild money where it needed to be sent, and eventually things blew over and he was able to return. And now you are come to repay my kindness with your own. This is good and right, and I thank you for the thought. I must warn you, however, that you aren't the first to attempt this. Many men have gotten drunk and promised to get Grendel under their blades, only to end up leaving my hall gory and reeking of murder in the morning. And now my body of warriors is desperately depleted, and I am at my wit's end. Very well, you may try, if you are decided. Let us drink in Heorot tonight! And so they did.